Thanks, Becky, and thank you everyone for coming out on a Saturday morning. You can tell that I'm well rested, but thank you for coming out on a Saturday morning when it's so cold too. My Australian/Californian blood is not used to this weather, so thank you for coming. I'll start with a quick image description for those who might benefit from that. I'm a disabled white woman in my 30s, and I have shoulder-length blondish hair. I'm wearing a black sweater with some sequins and a lightning bolt on it to make myself look sparkly and make myself look more awake than I am, and a velvet blazer. And I'm sitting in my mobility scooter named Diana, Princess of the Maskutra. And if you know Wonder Woman, then you know that she is named after Wonder Woman and even has the bedazzled W right here on the top. So that's not for Weezer, as I'm sometimes asked. All right, I'm gonna just talk with you for a few minutes today, reading a section from my book about the disabled God, a concept and chapter that everyone agrees with and no one has any problem with at all. And then I'll open it up to Q&A and time for us to talk with one another. And that's what I'm most looking forward to, just to get to learn from all of you and to hear your questions, get to converse with you. And then of course, if you would like your book signed, we'll do that as well. So this comes from the chapter of Disabled God, and I'll just be periodically checking in with our ASL interpreter here to make sure everyone is getting it. The woman next to me is sobbing. The man across the aisle is jumping up and down as if he's about to go a few rounds in a boxing ring, despite wearing ripped skinny jeans. No one dares to make eye contact with me, but everyone in the congregation glances my way, making sure I hear the promises the lyrics hold me. We're at the part of the song that explains there'll be no lame in heaven, because in Jesus' presence we'll be healed. Non-disabled folks couldn't be happier. It's a sea of buffalo flag arms raised high in the air. Never mind that I don't feel broken or incomplete. Everyone else is too wrapped up in my erasure to notice. Everyone's so sure I'll be fixed in heaven. Do you realize that Jesus' body is the only one that won't be perfect in heaven? The preacher starts. I'm not sure what qualifies him to make such a proclamation. Has he been to heaven? What is a perfect body anyway? But no one else seems to question it. Most folks in the crimson-backed pews cheer for this claim, as if someone's just announced we're each going home with a brand new Mercedes. Instead of Oprah shouting, "You get a car," it's a preacher screeching, "You get a perfect body, and you get a perfect body, and you get a perfect body," to each of us in turn. As if the lack of perfect bodies is the predominant thing wrong with our current world. I'd be more excited no one hungers or thirsts in new creation, especially since in our wealthy nation, 1 in 6 children don't know where their next meal comes from. But I guess my disabled body would be the focus of your praise if you were just trying to distract yourself from doing something about poverty. We have enough food to prevent people dying from hunger. We just don't want to share it. One thing the preacher gets right that resonates with me: Jesus triumphed over death and retains the scars of crucifixion. God is disabled, and who's to say we will be any different? Driving home from the service, the palm fronds passed by in a blur as I wondered to myself, not for the first time, what church would be like if pastors understood God in the way that I do, as disabled. What if we could imagine the mobility device as similar to one God uses to reign? When Daniel visits the clouds of heaven, he describes the throne was fiery flames and its wheels burning fire. Daniel 7:9. A chair with wheels sounds a lot like a wheelchair to me, and one that gives new meaning to burning rubber. Maybe that's something we could sing about. Cue this swelling acoustic guitar music. Conveniently, the animated chorus forgets that God's throne is a fiery wheelchair when they buzz about heaven. Who told us is a metaphor, not to take things so literally? But if anyone had bothered to ask me, they would know that when I picture an idyllic world, I picture ramps. How else would my upgraded, flaming wheelchair get around? Turns out it's not just me and Daniel picturing God in a wheelchair. Ezekiel describes God as a massive mobility device that is lifted. Ezekiel describes God as a radiant fire with a massive mobility device that is lifted by 4 angels with fused legs and colossal wheels. The wheels encase wheels that glisten like topaz, Ezekiel 1:15-21. God uses a fiery, shimmering, turquoise wheelchair to get around, and so should I. My wheels liberate me and allow me to operate in tandem with my mobility scooter, Diana. Her tires grip the pavement, absorbing the shock waves that my legs would otherwise have to endure. I lean into her ever so slightly as we go around the corner, like water gently caressing the riverbank as it flows. I feel the texture of the earth, the rhythm of the cement. I hear the symphony of vibrations as we drift from concrete to cobblestone. My physicality does not stop at the tip of my toes or the crown of my head. It extends to the frame of my cobalt chair, able to transport me to new worlds. Just like Ezekiel's vision, I am fused with these wheels that are my ticket to freedom. I am body, wheel, and fire. So I'd love now to learn from all of you just kind of what questions you have if you've read the book, or from this piece if you haven't, what questions and ideas that you have that you'd like us to talk about today. Yeah, Becky's coming to you with the mic.
How do you deal with people coming up to you in let's say Maya, and just saying, hey, let me pray for you? Because I've had experience that it's not, I never really know what to say. Do I just say no and smack them? It's probably not the best recompense action.
Yeah, usually I just run them over with my scooter and then I'm gone before anyone knows what happened. So you could whack them with your cane, yeah. That's tricky, isn't it? Because I think most people are really well intentioned, and when I have received that from people, I think it's coming from a good place, but it still hurts. And it hurts because there's a lot of assumptions that I am in need of fixing, or that somehow I am not already displaying God's image to the world because I'm disabled. So it kind of depends on the context for me, what I say. Usually I remind them that I'm already sanctified and redeemed and made in the image of a creator who told the stars where to shine and the oceans where to stop. And then if they persist, as often they do, then I get a little more testy, usually. Depends how much coffee I've had. Yeah, Becky, it's coming to you.
Denomination or group, is there a certain denomination or group you have the most trouble with when it comes to holier than thou attitudes about your disability?
Ooh, tough question. I don't think that in my experience, I have noticed that any one group is less or more inclusive when it comes to disability. I think every group wants to think that they are, but that hasn't been my experience. Even groups that claim to be welcoming to our disabled neighbors, I still have received lots of potions, prayers, comments from folks in every church I've been a part of, regardless of the denomination.
I think people that have never been disabled or even permanently or temporarily, they don't understand what it's like to be on the other side of the fence. I get tired of questions. How you feeling today? where do you want me to start? You know, I've got so many issues going on that it's easy just to say fine and just leave it. 'Cause, and I don't think the church knows what to do with this. How do we use this person? As far as your comments about God and heaven, I think God is obviously perfect. And since there will be no pain in heaven, I think our disabilities will be healed. I don't think we'll lose the memories that we had, and we know the Lord understands what we're doing, especially when you get run over by someone walking to the grocery store and they somehow don't see you in the riding cart as they cut in front of you. You have to slam on the brakes or hit them. Yeah. It's like I'm invisible. It's like, hello, no, if I stood up, you would see me. I'm 6'2". But I'm sitting in the, I have little old ladies now in the grocery store. Ask me if I need help reaching anything. Where 10 years ago, I was the one standing and the little ladies were asking me to help them. So. And I don't think, at least in my experience so far, like I said, I think I'm extra on 12 years into issues. I don't think you ever get used to it. It's all, I mean, we deal with it every day, we live with it every day. I think the hardest thing for me yet, and I think it's partly because issues keep coming up and doctors weren't able to diagnose me until like a year and a half ago. Is I pretty much gave up on healing. You know, people would say, I'll pray for your healing. And then 7 years into it, like, you can say to breath. And I don't know if that was the devil after me or my own ruthless reality of nature, my friend who hears a lot. But I get tired of being ignored. And in church. People just walk by, don't say hi.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that with us. I think there's so much of that I resonate with, and this idea of being ignored and of people not acknowledging your presence, and not just your presence, but your gifts in the community. And part of what I hoped to do in the book is to invite people into some of that reality that many of us live every single day. And to give people a window into what has become the norm in my life, folks commenting on my body all the time, instead of asking, how is God at work through disability? How can disability teach and guide and, you know, help the community flourish? And I think that that's what I hope to do in the book, and by sharing some of my stories and inviting others to do the same. You sharing your story with your community, others hopefully being encouraged to share their stories. And then it's not just about my experiences, but how this is often all too pervasive in churches.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier, and there has to be a story here. Oceans?
Yeah, and I see a hand over here next. Potions, yes, I have been the recipient, unsolicited, of different potions in my life. Some of them, you know, including essential oils, others with other herbs and remedies that people have just seen me at church one Sunday, and then the next brought a potion to me and either attempted to rub it on my forehead or just given it to me and told me that would cure me. So yeah, over time that does something to you to be the recipient of that. I think what that signals to us is that people see my body are immediately trying to fix it instead of, again, asking, how can I learn with and from this participant in the body of Christ?
Nope, needed this to work. Oh, like I'm really loud enough.
I think it was on.
It was on.
You got it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Is there, I guess it's kind of twofold. So is there anything that you wish your parents had understood better about disability growing up?
Let me give it a list.
And then also like, what would you tell a parent of a child with disabilities of like, yeah, these are some things that you should learn, or these are some things that would be helpful for you to do, or, yeah, all of those things.
I think my parents did the best they could. I think that they got a lot right, and just inevitably, because they're human, they also messed up, and they would say that to you too. I think that something that my parents did that I'm eternally grateful for is that they listened to me. I think they listened to my experiences. I was by no means in charge or, calling the shots, but they listened to my experiences, and they grew as a result, I think is fair to say. They didn't know about disability. They didn't know the words to use or the issues that we would encounter at the doctor and at school and at the grocery store and in parking lots and at church. They had no awareness of it before I rocked up. And I think that they were willing to stretch themselves and grow. And I think that's what love really is, the elasticity that we're willing to stretch ourselves for one another. I think I would say to parents of disabled children that your child radiates God's image and has gifts to teach you. Your child isn't a mistake or a before picture in a prayer makeover. Your child is not a exhaustion or a deficit or an embarrassment. And even though all of those things are the way that the world treats us, to know that your child is fearfully and wonderfully made. And I think we just can't say that enough. Thank you.
Years ago, I heard.
Hold on, Peggy's coming with the mic, just so everyone can.
Gotta get it out before I forget it. Years ago, I heard, one of the radio shows from Focus on the Family, Dr. Dobson, and he was talking about, abortion and the reasons people give for needing an abortion. And the only thing I remember from, and this was 25 years ago, but he said, God does not make any mistakes. Every child he knew was going to be conceived and born. And that child is made in his image. So to say we're doing this to save the mother's life, that's even more true now. I've heard doctors say that that doesn't really fly anymore. Maybe in some cases, I think it does, but it's no reason to murder a child. The Dr. Dobson said, God makes no mistakes. Every child is made in his image.
And imagine if we actually acted like that. And I think that's the invitation here, isn't it? That too often we say that we believe that, but that doesn't really bear out in the way so many of us have been treated in churches. And I think that while many people don't say that part out loud to my face, although some do, if you stop sitting, you'd be able to walk, or what sin is preventing you from running? That's another one I've had. Do they want me to list them? I'm not sure. But I think while most people won't say those things out loud, I think many people still think that on some level. they think that my body and disabled bodies in general are connected to some sort of deficit or loss or sin. And the hope is that instead of just saying that everyone is made in the image of God, that we act like. And I think what that looks like in practice is really learning from disabled people. And there are very few times I can remember in my life where I have had a disabled pastor, elder, teacher, professor, doctor. And even now, when I teach, many times students will say to me, I didn't know professors could be disabled. You know, thank you. So that's really signaling to us that that's so not the norm, even though we're a quarter of the US population. That it's so not the norm that it's still a surprise. And one of the hopes of the book is that it invites people to rethink some of those assumptions.
Is it wrong to not like that you're disabled? Not be happy to be blind, be cast out or hated by others just for not being able to see? Is it wrong to want to be cured? Is it wrong to, actually beg God for many years of your life? Is it wrong to hope to be cured?
I think that's above my pay grade. I think that's between you and God. I will say that I too have gone on my own journey. I have not always been this fierce person wearing sequins that sings before you, that drops no water bottle on the stage after calling herself fierce. Thank you. I too have been on a journey, and I think that there's a lot of grace along the way. I think that for me, what I started to notice is that so many examples out in creation were what I would call disabled, and I didn't think of those as negative or bad, and yet that wasn't applied to my own body. So I'm from Australia, kangaroos can't walk backwards, they can only go forwards. And we don't really think of that as a disability, but that's a type of disability, right? They can't do something that we consider to be normative. And we know that elephants are born blind and turtles are born deaf and lions sleep most hours of the day, like many of us spoonies. And yet we don't think that any of those animals are somehow lacking or have a deficit. In fact, we think that they are fierce and fabulous and radiant. And how much the more for those of us who bear God's image. And so I started to go on my own journey of witnessing the splendor of creation and thinking about how if I could admire and behold the beauty in all of those animals, how come I couldn't do that for my own body and mind? So I'm not sure if that's helpful or encouraging to you, but if it is, I think the more that we can notice the beauty and the gifts of disability, the more that we can start to change some of what some of us have shared here today. Yeah, Becky's coming with the mic.
My husband is a campus pastor who works with students with disabilities. And one thing, and he talked to you a little bit before, he's got a hearing loss and learning disabilities. And one thing that he emphasizes with the students a lot that is to forgive people. They don't understand, they're not in your body, and just, forgive them. They were well-meaning. A lot, most of the time, they just don't understand. And that is one thing that resonates with me in his ministry. It's just to emphasize forgiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these stories are shared from a place of wanting to invite people to a more compassionate way, but also shared with a lot of grace. And there are many stories that I don't share in the book, and many that I think are too tender to share. And so I hope that these stories are shared with an attitude of graciousness and with an attitude of openness, that it's really for the good of the body that I'm sharing these stories. Yeah.
You've talked about seeing Jesus in eternity through a lens of disability. Should those of us who are not disabled also talk about the incarnation when an infinite God becomes limited? Should we also use disability language there?
Yeah, I love that. I think that that makes a lot of sense. And I certainly resonate with that. I think the idea of God becoming human and the ways that that can connect and help us understand our own human experiences and our own human condition is really important. And also what I received from that question is this idea that those of us who are disabled might have something to teach people who are not disabled. And I think that that could be a really rich and generative question for those of us who are non-disabled to be asking.